And welcome Jorge Castro,
How
who
y'all
has
doing?
been all over the place. He started off life over at Oakland University, and then decided that was not nearly as broad as a horizon as he would like to have had, and moved over to Canonical, where he's one of the four horsemen. And then said, you know what, I want to broaden my horizons even more. Went over to Heptio, and then bounced over to VMware, and then bounced over to other places heretofore unspoken that are in his bio and whatnot. So yeah, George, let everyone know who you are. And
Thank you. Sorry, I got a stretch here. I'm getting old.
was that a
I got
stretch?
I got a cramp in my stomach.
I
Oh,
hate
feel
that when it
oh
happens.
yeah. So I started Mug when I was like really young, and then like you don't pay attention to accessibility in computers. Then I turned 45, and I have to increase the font so like this big. All right, we're gonna share a screen here.
45.
Someone.
That's so old.
Well, I'm older than 45 now.
Yeah.
All right. Is that thing still showing up?
Oh, yeah.
It is a
Still
little
looks
bit,
like it.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Because someone gave me a tip on YouTube to do that. Sorry, I can't figure it out. Linux screen
It's
sharing.
much
It's not my
smaller.
fault. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Someone told me how to shut it off. So I was furiously
Okay.
Googling
Yeah.
while Craig was distracting y'all.
It looks fine.
Yeah, awesome. So how much time do I have?
Oh, we tell people 45 to 90 minutes.
90 minutes. Oh man, I
And
could
if
go all
you're
day.
under or over, that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right. So as I'm sharing, I actually can't see your faces anymore. So Craig, I'm counting on you to yell at me, which I think you will do with much precision. Okay.
Definitely.
So I want to do this more as like a workshop where I'm going to show you how I use my computer every day, because people are very confused when they hear the term immutable desktops. And I'm hoping that by the time I'm done here, you're not using those terms and you're using more precise language, because like when you read about this kind of stuff, it's very confusing. You don't know what's going on. It means a lot of things to different people. If you come from cloud, the idea of an immutable artifact that you deploy onto a cluster is like a common thing that people know, but like people don't know how to translate that to how the modern Linux desktop works. I am going to scope this to just a desktop today. There are image-based operating systems for servers. So you might have heard of CoreOS. Flatcar Linux is another one. And Talos Linux is another one. And I think OpenSUSE has one. There's like a bunch of these. So each of them do it through different methods. And I think as I walk through this here, hopefully you'll have some understanding. And if not, just ask questions, because I sit in meetings all day with slides. I just did not want to do slides. I'd rather just have a conversation. And then if someone could just MC questions for me, I don't. Do we want to wait till the end till questions, or do it interactively? I think interactively is like the way I'd prefer it. But
If
I'll do
people
what the
have
group wants.
questions that they don't necessarily want to unmute themselves, I will
Okay.
be more than happy to field questions.
Yes, please put Craig to work, because he's the one that tricked me into doing this presentation. Okay. All right. I'm going to start with the most important thing, which is, what problem are we trying to solve? Like Linux client. Does anybody have any idea of what problems we're trying to solve when people say immutable desktops? You can type them out and Craig will read them out, or you can hop in for a minute. And then I will give you an example.
I guess the problem of knowing everything that's running on your machine, right? You wouldn't want to
Okay.
deploy something that you weren't aware of.
Okay. What else?
Tampering.
Snapshots, rollback ability.
Snapshots, rollback. Okay. What else? When someone says I run an immutable Linux, what do you think?
And Michael says competing library versions, driver incompatibilities.
Yeah, libraries. Let's just call this what this is. Libraries. Lol.
Roller Angel says read only. Security by from Tony C, and
Okay.
Security Locked Code by Gib.
Locked code. Ooh, that's a good. Okay. All right.
After story on YouTube says, my guess is security first and stability of the system.
Stability. Okay. All right.
One quarter life says package management, package managers, but package management.
Ooh, package managers. Good one. Good one. Okay. All right. Let's start with those before I end up having to explain all of Unix. And I don't know it all anyway. It's impossible for one person to know anything. Like when I grew up, like user bin had like, I don't know, 50 things in it. Who knows? Well, we'll count later when we get into the terminal. All right. So I'm going to start with the big one. Stability. I need 2 volunteers. We're going to say Wolf, Craig. Wolf, what do you use on your desktop? Let's pretend you're using a Linux if you are. If you're using OS 10, does not count.
I have a Linux box next to me,
Okay, perfect.
but it is not what I'm broadcasting with right now.
Okay. What Linux you got on there?
Kubuntu.
Kubuntu. What version? It doesn't have to be the exact one. Let's just say
I think it's 22.
okay. 22. All right. Craig, what are you rolling with?
Stock Ubuntu 2004.
Ubuntu 2004. All right. We're going to go back in time. 10 years. Remember this? I was like young, speaking at Mug. You know, world is my oyster, feeling all the things.
Live CD was all the rage. Right?
Live CD.
Live USB, right?
Yeah. Everyone remember Knoppix with a K? Remember
yeah.
that thing? All right. Okay. 6 months has passed. What comes after 10.04 in Ubuntu land? We're gonna Ubuntu is gonna be the example for today. What comes after 10.04, Craig?
1010.
10.10. Wolf is gonna move to 12.10. Okay. Craig goes to Mug, finds out about a great new technology in 2010. What was hot in 2010?
God. Wasn't that when we didn't do Unity at that point.
Yeah.
Nice.
Pick a dev thing, some language programmer.
Let's say that we were moving over to a new version of Python, like Python 2.6 or
Okay, so everyone's talking about
that's
Python.
maybe too early, but yeah.
Sure. That's actually the perfect example. Craig goes to Mug. Who's giving the talk on Python? You know who's really great at Python? Wolf.
Yeah.
Says, you all got to get into this new Python. It's going to take like way longer to move to Python 3. I don't know. Was the Python 3 transition even happening back then, or were we that? I don't know.
I think,
Anyway,
I think it was.
6 was in 2008. That's how badly I remember things.
excellent.
Let's say 2.7. That was like the hot release. You know.
Okay.
Like everything got fixed.
All right. So Craig, inspired by Wolf, totally inspired by Wolf, wants Python, right? Installs Python on 10.10. Oh no, that feature that Wolf was talking about, not in 10.10. What does Craig do?
Compile some source, because why wouldn't you? Or
All
finds
right.
it a PPA.
Bam.
Existed.
Okay. Wolf says this works for me. At first, it works for Craig until it is the next version of Ubuntu, which is 11.04, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wolf is going to move to 13.04. Craig's always 3 versions behind, let's just say. He's playing it safe, or he's doing LTSs or something. Craig runs into a problem, right? Goes to do an upgrade, and then app will tell him there's kind of a conflict here. You have a new version of Python or whatever, and the system one expects something. You might have seen this when you use Ubuntu packages in normal things. They'll put like version number, Ubuntu. Sometimes they go really is version. I don't know if you've seen this before on packages, right? Python, and they do all sorts of tricks to try to make that upgrade work. Because if that upgrade doesn't work, you yell at George for working on Ubuntu. So Craig now has to run a program called PPA purge, which is a script someone wrote to try to make your system go back to the stock 1104, right? Time passes. Eventually, it's LTS time, which was what, 1404?
Yeah.
Don't worry, we're almost done. This part's kind of a key here to explain this here. 1404 LTS. I used to look forward to this because that was like the great. All right, everyone's going to reset on the same version. It's the LTS. Like the people want the new stuff will be on it. The people who are risk averse will move to it, right? This is like the platform that people will build on. Same thing happens with Fedora. You know, that like kind of every 2 years you get the stable thing, right? And some people want to upgrade every 2 years. Some people want to do it every 6 months. Some people want to do it every day, right? What are the chances that Wolf's machine and Craig's machine's Python are exactly the same? Let's assume it's been 3 more versions, and every time Craig goes to a meeting, Wolf tells him about some great new technology. So by the time we get to 1404, Node, Ruby, yeah, everyone has that Ruby phase, right? Like Golang is going to become a thing here pretty soon, and Craig's has got to have it, right? Because Wolf is such a good speaker. Yeah, I just got to have all that dev stuff, right? What are the chances that those language stacks look the same on Wolf's machine and on Craig's machine?
Close to 0, right?
0.
I have machines with like multiple copies of on one machine, you know.
Right. So I'm going to simplify this for you because as a new Linux user, you think this is true, right? You started off with A. You did stuff. You did stuff as root. You did stuff with package managers. You created directories that weren't supposed to be there because you learned on you know how Windows people go into the file system and delete like system directories because you don't want to go through the add remove program. So you just go blow stuff away, right? And then they go use Linux and they think it's the same, right? And then it's either time to go back to A, right? So you either do an upgrade or I used to do this, keep track of all the changes that you have, right? Or try to do like a file system snapshot or something, right? And then we're back to A, right? Are we back at A?
No.
Merge
We are
conflict
at
somewhere.
C. We've created C. More dangerously, most users think they have A, right? This is the only problem we're trying to solve is when I say I want to go back to Ubuntu 10.04, I need to be able to guarantee down to every single last bit that is the same artifact that shipped. However, because we have a package manager and all of these kinds of things, stuff gets all over the place. And then undoing them is certainly feasible. We've all had that machine that's been upgraded for as long as Craig's machine, right? And then it feels like it's fine, right? Until, you know, maybe a disk fails or something, you know, discounting a hardware upgrade, right? You ever do a clean install and you get that fresh feeling, right? Where you're like, man, everything's like a lot faster than it was before because you have 10 years worth of stuff there, right? Contrast this with your mobile phone. So how do iPhones work? Anyone give me the TLDR on how iPhones work? System upgrades, Android the same. Let's just say mobile. You get a little notification that says update pending, right? And then what do you have to do? The thing you hate. Right? Because what's happening is it's getting those updates. And depending on the method, I'm not going to go too much into the detail of AB reboots and all that stuff. That gets a little hairy. And most of you are like way smarter than that and be able to call out all my technical inaccuracies. So I'm going to talk today mostly about patterns and concepts in order to spur discussion and things like that. So what happens is on a phone, you get your updates, but they're being applied to a copy, either a copy of the operating system or there's some kind of magical thing that someone wrote that lets you stage all those updates, but the running machine is not upgraded in place, right? So what happens is when you get your phone, you get that update, it says reboot. You're rebooting into that new deployable artifact, right? And then the old one is either cleaned up, but it's always there for you to roll back to, which is a very handy thing. Now, this is important for the Linux client because on servers, you usually have like someone who's run apt for like 50, you're like a system administrator, right? So, hey, you got to keep this Debian box running for 20 years, right? Like people do that, right? But mostly what I'm going to concentrate on here today is bringing that kind of consumer level reliability back to the Linux desktop, because as you've seen back when I used to be at Mug, every 6 months when you have to do an upgrade, I still kind of get a little bit of anxiety, right? And then, especially when you're doing like the big one, right? My home server's Ubuntu 12.0. Every 2 years, it's been solid and reliable, right? But I also have to remember that I know what I'm doing, right? But I still get that anxiety that it's like, I block off time, right? I know it's going to go perfectly, but man, if Samba breaks, I don't even remember the last time I read that Samba man page. So, I got to account for that when I'm doing, I got to sit there and plan my upgrades and stuff. And I'm wondering why I even have a home lab, because I don't need that kind of anxiety at home. So this is what your mobile phone looks like. About 2 years ago, OS 10, sorry, they call it Mac OS now, right? I think something like that. Kind of went through a similar transition, right? And then your Android device, you especially see this on your tablet, right? Either an Amazon device or oh man, I miss Android tablets. Not really. But, I would say, hey, you downloaded a new thing, and then it would boot into it, right? And then you would go in there and you would find it, and it's usually like a tarball that they splat on the disk or whatever other method. So that makes it really, really handy and reliable to do client-side updates for people that are not system administrators. And also, it's an atomic operation. So what we mean by that is we download all the updates and they get put somewhere else, right? And then if you boot into the thing, let's say you got a bad update, right? Usually the systems they just automatically kick back to the known stable point, right? So that's an important thing to remember, because sometimes I think many of you probably do like IT for your families and things like that, right? And it's like, here, I have a device. It's always those IoT junk devices, right? Where it's like, this thing does not work. What do? You pull the power plug, and you plug it back in, and then it runs for a while, and then maybe you have to do it again, right? It's one of those cases where the application that's written for that device is totally awful, right? But at the bare minimum, rebooting the thing gets it back to a known state, right? And you see this in consumer electronics, right? You buy your new Steam Deck, you're ready to go, or you buy a new device or new gaming device or a new console, you're ready to go. What's the first thing it does? I need to do updates, right? And it's like it downloads the entire operating system again, flashes it, and then reboots into it. Now, imagine is instead you had your PlayStation and someone said you have to do an apt-get upgrade on your PlayStation, right? Like imagine you did that and then you pull the power plug on the back. I don't know how many of you have ever done a mid upgrade, right? And then you pull the power plug from the machine, or the next time you type apt-get upgrade after it downloads and it's going through the packaging thing, close your terminal or interrupt it, right? And then what happens? You run apt again and it says, I don't know what's going on. Can you type dpackage reconfigure A, right? How many of you have done this? Am I vibing with people? Has anyone not gone through this before? Same with
I've been there.
RPMs every day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like really awful, right? And I've noticed something as well, and it's that usually when you get a device, right, and it comes out a little early, and you hear normal people talking about it, right? They're like, hey, what do you think about that gadget? They're like, yeah, when I first got it, it was a little janky, but then eventually it got like updates, and now it's totally much better, right? And I think part of the reason, and I hate this, is that manufacturers start shipping things before they are ready, is because they know that they have a reliable pipeline to that device that will mean at some point the user will reboot this, and all of the mistakes that we made over the past 2 years being rushed to ship this thing won't be as awful as it was before. Like my car is like this. It drives me nuts because nobody finishes software anymore, but that is a different talk. But they do have that like mostly reliable pipeline of getting the device updated. And you're going to notice I'm going to start calling things devices a lot in this talk, but I'm really actually talking about general purpose computers, right? So nobody mentioned this. Usually when people talk about these immutable systems, they say things like inflexible, uncustomizable, weird. Okay. So I'm going to show you, this is a system that I'm on here today. There are two main methods that I'm going to bring up today. I'm going to mention a bunch, but there's two that I think are important, and then I'm going to talk about one. Actually, I should just tell you what this is. Okay, so the first one is something that came out of Red Hat. It's called OSTree, and that's what I will be talking about mostly today, because it's a thing that you could use today. It's kind of the furthest along when it comes to the let's make the Linux desktop feel more the update experience, be more reliable and more. Fedora brands this as atomic. So when they talk about their distributions, they usually say atomic Fedora, and then you have like quote unquote normal Fedora, right? Where normal Fedora is like your typical normal distro, right? And then atomic Fedora is different, and that's what I'm going to go over to today. That method is called OSTree. It's been around for a really long time. You've likely used an OSTree device and not know it because it's been kind of out there in the IoT land. There's definitely other companies and stuff that use it. It was like the weird one, and I'll get to that in a little bit. The second one is a relatively new one. It's part of systemd called systemd system extensions, and it differs in a way where what you have is disk image tarballs that get splatted onto a different base thing, and then you get the flexibility that you want. I am not very familiar with that, although I do know that people that are. I just wanted to get it all on your radar because that's also going to be a method that is going to be useful. Another one you might commonly see is the OpenSUSE pattern, which they use Btrfs snapshots, which are file system based, right? So what they do is every time you do that, oh, bummer, I shouldn't erase that. Every time you add that package or do an RPM transaction, it takes a file system snapshot, and that gets you the rollback and the snapshot ability. So it's like, oh no, I installed that PPA. That was a mistake. I'm going to roll that back, right? So OpenSUSE actually ships like this today. It's called Aeon, AEON, and it's really good. So if you really like Btrfs snapshots and are a file system kind of nerd, that's the one I recommend. But what I'm going to go over today is the RPM-OSTree method, because it also uses some common cloud patterns that are really what's it called when you really like something? Appealing to me. Thank you very much. All right. Do we have any questions so far? Any burning issues? Have I lost anybody? Is anyone?
No, you definitely got me interested. I ran into this a million times when I first got into Linux. I would just erase the whole machine and reinstall.
Exactly. So at one point, cloud came along in 2008, right? And then you would get your instance, you would get your remote instance somewhere, right? In Amazon or Linode, whatever you're into, right? And then at some point, people started to realize that, it's easier, instead of doing an in-place upgrade, to just fire off a new instance of something and then rerun Terraform or Puppet or Chef or whatever thing you have and just stand it up from scratch than trying to do an in-place upgrade. So in cloud, that kind of A/B deployment methodology where you stand up the new thing and it's got the new version of your database, and then you run your app on it, and then you test stuff, and then you do a canary thing and all that stuff. That's really, really neat. But those patterns can also kind of apply to the desktop in a simplistic manner. But I don't want to lose anybody with like red-black deployments, and that's a talk for somebody else. All right. So what I'm going to talk about today is RPM-OSTree, and I prefer this method for a few reasons. Is the way OSTree works, it has a Git-like file structure, which means they took the entire Unix, like starting from slash, and then just imagine you shove that whole thing in Git. Okay. In kernel, everything is just in Git. All right. And then someone takes that and does a Podman build or a Docker build, and then creates an OCI container. So like when you Docker pull Python or Docker run MySQL or whatever, it makes a blob, an OCI blob. OCI stands for the Open Container Initiative. It started off as Docker images, and then eventually there was like a standards body put around it, and then it took over the modern world, and that's why Kubernetes exists. That's a different story as well. The important thing I want you to remember is that OCI containers are tarballs, and then a little bit of metadata. In fact, if you look at one, you know what? Let me get to that one later. Just big tarballs, and then we shove those things in registries, right? So when you go pull something from Docker Hub, that is a registry. You can run one actually on your system. There's a bunch of these. Red Hat makes one called key.io, which is spelled QUAY.io, which is some nautical term. I don't know. There's an open one called Zot. We have one at VMware called Harbor. There's a bunch of these registries, and they all do like load balancing and all this kind of stuff. So it's like a general, well-known technology that has been deployed for a long time. So this was very interesting to me as a cloud nerd, because it's like, I could just put my operating system into a registry. Now, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, but it's important that you know that now in order to explain what we're going to do next. So this is what an RPM-OSTree status looks like on my machine. And this is, it tells you, this dot here tells me the current image that I'm booted in, which is a OCI container, and it's used as a transport mechanism. So when it's actually on my machine, I am not in a normal container. I'm booted off the metal, which is an important thing to remember. Like, you're not booting into a container, you're kind of just using it as a transport mechanism. And that's an important thing to remember when we're talking about RPM-OSTree. And then what's this down here is actually my snapshot that I was booted into until I started to prepare for this meeting. So my computer was actually on Fedora 38 with the snapshot from December 14th. So I'm in my basement. I left the machine running. I didn't really pay attention. So I hadn't rebooted it. So what I did is when I came down here, I did the thing. I was like, oh, I need to do an update. And so I did that. And then I rebooted into the machine before the meeting. And now I'm on Fedora 39, 2024-0109. That is the version of Fedora that I am in. Now, this might be weird, but usually when you refer to these things, you refer to the versions as one whole thing, right? Like if I go and I want to get help from a buddy, I say, hey, are you seeing this issue? I'm on 39.24.0.19 and we're cloud nerds. So we'll be like, yeah, this hash or whatever. And then I can guarantee that we're on the same image between those two machines. So that's what I'm doing there. Additionally, you can do a, is this font cool? Hello?
Yeah, it looks fine.
Oh,
Just
okay.
fine.
All right. Good.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
oh no.
I don't know
I
if it's
disconnected.
cool. I mean, it looks good. It's normal.
It looks good. It looks good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Decent.
So when people say immutable operating systems, what happens is if you look at all of the things on a Unix system that you as a user needs to touch, right? And actually people have done this in the past. Like those of you that might have worked with Sun Systems back in the day where like /user was actually an NFS mount that was mounted read-only. right? For like security reasons and stuff. There's a bunch of security aspects to this. I'm not a security expert other than, yes, there are security implications by having the file system be read-only. But I usually don't delve into those because there's like way smarter people about this stuff. And now security is like so complicated. I just tell people to go read the experts because I don't want to embarrass myself. So we assume that the file system is read-only on this, right? So I'm going to go to some directories, and then you're all going to tell me whether it should be readable or writable, right? So we're going to go into the root disk, and we need to be what? Root, right? So let's do it. Oh, that's my own bug. I love this terminal. It like turns red when I'm in root, so I can remind myself not to be dumb. Okay. In order to do this, Fedora had to move some stuff around. So you might see my actual home directory is /var/home/George. And if we go, what happened to home George, right? Nope, that's not what I how do I nuts.
Throw an L in there?
Yeah, is it L?
Yeah.
Awesome. Nope. We want
I thought you were looking for the
S. We want the S, right?
Right.
We want the link? No.
No,
You know
it's
what?
You want D.
Dash
Right,
D
right.
for directory.
ls minus ld.
ALD? Does that work? There you go.
You don't need the A, but that's okay.
Yeah, that should be a symlink. Hold on. Okay, so that's my home directory. That's weird. Anyway, I'll investigate why that is. Normally that works. Anyway, so in order to make all of this work, they had to move some directories around. So according to the documentation, apparently not this machine, /home/u will be linked to like /var/home/George. Otherwise, like no programs would work because most programs assume you're going to be in home. And also, as you can see here, anything in your home directories is mutable. So I just talked about reliability and all of that kind of stuff. I'm talking about system things like packages. Are you on the right kernel? Things like that. If you go into your home directory and you delete your .kde files or whatever, they're gone, right? Or we're starting to find out that some programs don't really respect your home directories and they put .files around. And you're like, I have a brand new clean install, but this program is still behaving incorrectly, right? It's because in your backup, you backed up the .file and the .file is kind of garbage, right? So I've done the thing where it's like, I want to back up my data, but blow away my .config files because I don't want to bring any of that cruff with me. That stuff 100% still exists and it sucks and I hate it. But
right, because sometimes there's even an application update that doesn't merge that .file for you, so you're missing features.
Yes, exactly. Or the version upgraded and did a one-way upgrade of like that SQLite database or whatever. Did this ever happen before? Where like, I think this happened in Firefox like a long time ago, where like a major version did a thing, and then if you backed up your profile, like the schema in the database or whatever would be. Anyway,
I think that was Thunderbird.
was that Thunderbird?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of programs.
Once you started the new one, you couldn't go back to the old one.
Ugh. Yeah. We're not fixing a lot of that. We're trying to so that's kind of I want you to remember that, because some people say, well, what about this? What do you think will happen if I hit enter here?
Haven't they put something in place that basically warns you now?
Yeah.
In Ubuntu, basically, but I'm
No,
sure
Right. Let's pretend I type yes, do as I say, or whatever it asks. What do we think will happen here?
loud noises from the hard drive.
You will
Probably.
destroy your computer. You're backing up from this.
Read-only file system, maybe?
No.
No?
Parts of the file system are read-only. Other
Mhm.
parts, not so much.
Yeah.
So I want you to remember, when you're root, you're still a system administrator. So if you type this command and you type yes, do as I say, it will destroy your computer. right? So
Git has a
I just,
question, by the way, George. It
oh
says,
yeah, go ahead.
is the var log directory read only?
We're about to get to that stuff.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
All right. So let's find out. Etsy system configuration. Can I write here or not? What's the audience think?
Your root. I mean,
You
yes.
should be able to make
Yeah.
changes if you'd like. Yeah.
Hey, that works. Sweet. All right. The root of the root. Oh God, there's my Nix experiment. Don't pretend you didn't see that. What about here?
Sure, why not?
All right. What about in here?
I'm gonna say no.
Survey says correct. What about here?
You should be able to modify that one.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I'm remembering how to Unix too. All right.
So I saw different error messages come up though between user bin and slash.
This one was read-only file system.
Yeah.
What did root say? Ah, let's go back.
Oh, it said, well,
Operation not
Yeah.
permitted, which I think is interesting. I'm going to look that one up.
Well, one looks like it's a file system is mounted read only.
Yeah.
The other one sounds more like a security policy. or
Right.
something.
Yep.
You think this is SC Linux? It could be.
Well, and there's other
Yeah.
things probably going on too.
Let's look at other ones. Var serve. This is where we put this is where we
So,
put
yeah.
files.
Yeah.
Hey, all right. What's left? CD var log, right?
Yeah, definitely.
What do we think?
Yes.
Hey, all right. Sweet. I got a bunch of foos all over my disk. Yay. All right.
Fortunately, you can roll back, right?
Yeah. Actually, no, on the mutable parts will, that's very interesting. I'm going to check. I'm pretty sure it will maintain your state. Additionally, when you're in Etsy on RPM-OSTree systems, when you do an upgrade, it'll do like this diff merge magical thing that I still don't understand. I can't explain it, but I haven't had any issues with it. So that's something one of you engineers is going to have to figure out for me. But here in Etsy, I also have rpm-ostree.conf, which is where I set my automatic update policy. So one of the things I love about these systems is if you're getting snapshots kind of transparently, there's no reason for me to not just leave auto updates on. So I just do that because on boot, the grub will show you each of these snapshots. Each of these is in your grub menu. So you're like, oh no, I need to go back.
Well,
I need
that's
to go
interesting.
back to this. So this will be in my grub menu. Additionally, remember when I said that you can the OSTree is very Git-like? One of the nice things I like is the ability to rebase. So we can say, these are my own custom images. Pretend this as your favorite distro, right? Whatever.
Mhm.
And then I can say 2023 4 actually 01 01, and it is 1 second. Conceptually that, but the actual UX, they're in the middle of fixing this user experience because this. Can you imagine people that they expect people to type this kind of stuff? Look at this. This is just look at this command. But there is 24. Am I getting this one right?
Can you list them?
They are on GitHub. Actually, now would be a good time to look at a registry. 1 second. So if I look at my custom image, you can actually see, can you all see that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's why. The tag is wrong. I got to put the major version in front. But actually, if you go into your registry, and this kind of looks just like when you're browsing on Docker Hub and you look for MySQL, right? It's got like how many people have downloaded this and tags, and you can go in here and do all that stuff. So what I actually want to do is 39, because we're on Fedora 39. And then boom, it will rebase that to me, right? However, here's what's cool, right? These are all atomic, which means we should be able to rebase to anything, right? What do we think will happen with when I run this command here? I changed that 39 to a 38.
I expect not found unless you have an image out there called that.
I do.
Oh.
Now, here's something. Let me translate this to Ubuntu for everyone, because this is all that Fedora nonsense, right? Imagine you upgraded to 2204, right? And then an important component or something doesn't work. This is usually like, I did a major upgrade and my sound doesn't work, right? Right? Did you ever wish you can undo a major distribution upgrade? If you said, I'm on 2204, I need to go back to 2004, right? If you wanted to do that, what options do you have? The obvious one is restore from backup, right? The second obvious one is reinstall it over itself, but preserve the home directory so that you can do that, right? Yeah. Which is actually not that bad, right? Right. But can you imagine doing that on your mobile phone? Like if like iPhone said that you had to do that, like people will go nuts. But we accept this behavior on our desktops for some reason, right? So conceptually, you can switch atomically between different images. To me, this is one of the most coolest, amazing features that I've ever had to use. Do I ever sit there and rebase machines backwards and forwards? At first I did, because I thought it was the coolest thing ever, right? Do I do it every day? Not really, but it's nice to know that it's there, right? Because inevitably, all software breaks, right? And it's just nice to be able to know at any given time, I can go back to however many images I have and know that that is the exact version of the operating system that my distribution wanted me to have that day, right? That is a very powerful pattern.
Okay, so I've got a question for you, George.
Sure.
You're using the words operating system and restoring. Are you talking about restoring the base OS but keeping your home directory?
Yep.
Okay.
So if I let this complete and I reboot, this machine will be on Fedora 38 with my exact. All of this stuff will be here.
So the rebase that you're doing, what is that giving you another item in Grub? So when you reboot, you can select it.
Yep. If we were to RPM-OSTree, I'm not gonna let that finish. I should have done this in a VM, but at some point I just forgot VMs existed. I'm sorry. VMware, rest in peace.
Isn't messing up your current session. Like nothing happens.
No, I hit Control C, right? Because it's atomic operation. It either happens or it doesn't happen, right?
Right, but if you hadn't hit Control C and let it finish, you would still be running your whatever OS you were running until you reboot. Is that right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. We are staging. They call this staging. They're staging all of the changes in RPM-OSTree, which is like in a single partition, right?
Yeah.
If this was an A/B partition setup, like how you might see on CoreOS, what happens is there's an entirely different partition. You have two copies of the OS, A and B. And what would happen is I'm in A, upgrade B, B's ready. I reboot and it puts me in B, right? And the next time I update, it updates A.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever partition I'm not in is what it updates, right?
Okay.
And that's what leads to the reliability, right? So this is also really annoying to people, right? Because it's like, man, I moved away from Windows to like not have to reboot to install things, and that drives me nuts, right?
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to mention some soft reboot stuff in a bit. But also, I think many of you might have noticed in the early days, you never needed to reboot Linux, right?
Yeah.
And then Windows, you had to reboot like a lot, right?
Yeah.
And then now I run kind of both. And it's like Linux needs to reboot more often. Windows actually needs to reboot less often, but it's still like way too many, right?
Yeah.
And then when you actually talk to like hardware engineers, firmware, all the stuff in your PC, it's just unreliable. It's like just PC as an architecture, like you just have to reboot stuff sometime, right?
Yeah.
This becomes problematic for people, right? Because as you saw, I get kind of lazy and I leave them, but I also don't use this machine very often, right? On my normal machines that I do regularly, what I do is on my laptops, you tend to kind of naturally power cycle themselves, right? Like before I go on a plane, I make sure it's off, that kind of stuff. And with workstations, I just find myself shutting them off when I'm not using them, and I always keep things nice and clean, right? The other advantage to this is it's an atomic operation. So you ever turn on a machine and you're like, oh no, this is Ubuntu 12. It's out of date, and how do you upgrade those? You have to do an upgrade incrementally to each version until you get to the desired state. Yeah. And by the time you get there, you're like, I should have just done, like we tell people this, right? You're like, just do a clean install. Just don't go.
You forgot what you were going to do.
Yeah. It's like so much easier to do a clean install, right? What's really nice about this atomic system is it's always, it doesn't matter where you are. You can always get to where you want to be, right? So Intel's Clear Linux has a similar style of system. It's another style of one of these. And I had an Intel NUC sitting in a box for like 2 years, and I was like, I wonder what's on here. I turned it on and I went through it downloaded like 2 gigs of updates, but it booted up perfectly because, and the version of Linux that I had on that NUC is the exact same one that is supposed to be there, which is kind of that atomic guarantee. Now, this all sounds really awesome, right? So what do you give up is probably a question some of you have. So first of all, the reboot thing. Systemd recently got a feature called soft reboot, where it will reboot all user space except for the kernel. So at some point, this is not integrated yet into our RPM-OSTree. We're hoping someday to see that. I talk to Upstream on the regular. Man, what cool stuff am I going to get? And one day it'll just be like you'll just log out of your desktop and log back in, and you'll be good to go. And you'll only need the full shutdown for when you want to do like a full kernel upgrade. So I thought that was really handy, and I'm really interested to see what happens to some software when they get a soft reboot, because something is going to be like wonk. Like I'm very interested to see how that looks like in practice, but it sounds amazing. So what do you give up? So the problem is so we're on Fedora, right? And you're like, okay, what do you need? What do you need on Fedora, Craig? What's the thing you install on your machine when you
NeoFetch?
DNF?
No.
DNF install NeoFetch. Huh. Weird. So on normal Fedora, there's no DNF. There's actually no package manager here. So immediately people flip out, right? Because they go, okay, so what's on here, right? So Vim's on here, but what if you like MVim, which is what NeoVim? It's NVim, right? Oh no, I need that DNF install NVim. No, right? So in the early days, this really frustrated people, right? Which is usually when people say these things are inflexible or whatever, they say, well, that means the only thing on my image is what Fedora says, right? And then there was like gnashing of teeth, right? It's just like Red Hat trying to control me or whatever. Right? But what you actually can do is RPM-OSTree install, what was it again, Craig? NeoFetch. Checking out tree, there's a lot of Git language, Git style language in the system. I'm going to do this just to prove a point here. So it's doing a bunch of stuff. It's like totally different from what you might be used to, even if you're like a Fedora user. I've been kind of switched over to Fedora for the last few years, and sometimes I get confused. Notice how slow it is. Those of you that use Git and have used large Git repositories, imagine how large your entire Linux file system is in Git. And that will give you an idea of what's happening here. So usually when you read about these things, they'll tell you, oh, you just replace it with RPM-OSTree install, right? And if you see here, I have a bunch of other repositories as well. This is the Fedora equivalent of PPAs, right?
Okay.
So you're thinking, okay, I want these atomic upgrades. I want all these cool things. This slow package thing is really a deal breaker for me, though, right? I mean, look, I'm trying to install one package, right? And look where we're going. And this is a very fast AMD machine. How many cores do I have on here? I'm doing this to prove a point here. Oh yeah, look at that. It's just kind of sitting there, wasting time, costing me money. Now it's going to do its metadata. You're just like, or whatever. But I want to finish this to kind of prove a point here, because this is an important piece here. Is if we have that image, what's happening here is when you're installing these extra packages, you are reassembling that image on the fly, right? And what RPM does is call this, what RPM-OSTree does is call this layering. We are layering a package on top of our base system. And that is an expensive computing operation. As you can see here, hasn't even downloaded the packages yet, right? There's some of you who've used RPM, they're like, okay, that looks familiar to me, right? And then you're getting here. This right here are the, their version of the PPAs, third-party repos. Wow, this is actually awesomely slow today. All right, we're going to come back to this here. Actually, no, it might be done. And now
what's getting overlaid on top there?
I will
Just
show you in a
or?
second. Yeah,
Okay.
It's actually question for the audience. What do we think is being layered additionally added to the image, to the base image? The command we ran was RPM-OSTree install neofetch.
Maybe the dependencies, if there are any.
All right. How are we doing on time?
Oh, we're good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
You guys having a good time? Is this totally confused? Do you hate this?
Yeah.
No,
I
this
hate
is
waiting
great.
for this, though, don't you? Right. So now imagine you go on Fedora's website, you download it, right? And then you go online and someone's like, yeah, install Emacs. Right? And then you have to sit here every single time you have to install a package. And for the longest time, people would say, this is the worst thing. This is actually, if I were to add up all this time, are you really saving me that much time? But if I never have to update my computer every 6 months, I don't know. And I don't know. I want it to be a clear win to me, right? So look what happened. We added neofetch, right? And all of its dependencies. Cool, right? What do we think happens if we try to run neofetch?
It's not there
Right,
yet.
not there yet.
Yeah. Great job, everyone. All right. There's an apply live function that like opens a thing and makes it right. And then you could do that, but you want to do the reboot. Now let's look at our status.
I mean, I would type rehash just because I'm used to command not being there for other reason, but
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Now
still
let's-
wouldn't find it.
Yeah, then I'd be thoroughly like, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Our RPM-OSTree status is different. See how it says deployments too? A lot of cloud terminology going on here, huh? Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of on purpose, right? Diff 16 added, right? There's our new SHA, or there's our base image SHA, right?
Right.
And is that the same? Yep. But then there's this diff here. So let's have a look. Here's all those repos, all the bad things. Look, staged. Yep. It's the state root, Fedora. There's all the packages. There's all the packages that were added just to get us neofetch, right?
On top of the base OS. Right.
On top of the base OS. The problem with this, I'm just going to skip to the end because I don't want any of you to do this. The problem with this is as you keep adding stuff, you end up in the same situation that you did before, except it's a little bit better. You can roll back and you can always do RPM-OSTree reset, which will strip all that off and get you back to where you need to be, right? So automatically better than what we had before. Does anybody want to use their computer that way? Because I do not.
No.
Right.
Like we go through all the effort, make our own package repository so we can pull it
Right.
from our own land. So it's
Right.
super fast.
Right. So then you're thinking the George thing, right? I'll just keep track of every package I need in a script, right? And then, run a thing every time I do an install, go to get a coffee, and the more packages you add, the slower it gets. It's not what I recommend.
Assuming you added them all.
Assuming I added, then you're like, oh no, I forgot that Vim plugin I needed. Yeah, that's.
Well, I was just thinking if you installed something like LaTeX or something like that, I mean, get a sandwich and
we'd be here all
the
night.
sandwich. Yeah,
we'd be here all night. So, a lot of people still think this is how people use like Fedora Silverblue and stuff, and some people do, and I don't like it. So we've been pushing this cloud native pattern a little bit more. So we have that. I'm going to come back to base images because I'm going to show you instead an alternative method. But what about if I just did this? And then just type sudo apt get apt install neofetch. Where do you think I am right now?
Still on the old image.
Nope.
Well, you're on an Ubuntu or Debian machine now.
I am. Any guess as to where I'm at?
A container.
Who was that? Who said that?
Oh, right, because you had like a hotkey in your terminal that jumped you to a box.
I did. So what if I told you how do you use SUSE? Zipper install neofetch? Is that any SUSE people in the audience?
Not me.
Yeah. Huh. Someone want to read this kernel version out to the audience?
6.6.9-200
dot
fc39.x86_64.
Oh, that's weird.
But the memory makes me, it's definitely running on your local machine.
Yep. This is my machine. This is my host machine, which as we've seen is Fedora, right?
Right.
What's this kernel version?
6.6.9 fc39. It's the same.
Right. But I'm in Ubuntu. What's going on here? Let's see. SUSE never lets me down.
Sharing the host kernel. So you're running containers.
Hey, all right. So at first you'd be like, oh, he's just going into a VM. That was really fast. It's not a VM. So what this is actually a container. So I am cheating though. I am using a cool new terminal called prompt, where I have predefined some containers here for you. There's a really great feature that I love. This is preferences, profiles, George. And then in here, I can say, always take me to Ubuntu. Sorry about that theme. I'm messing around, right? Now I open my terminal.
Oh, cool.
Right?
Interesting.
Open a new terminal. Sudo apt get apt-get install. I don't know what's in there. FFmpeg. Sure. How big do we think LaTeX is? Let's try it.
It's pretty big. It's a Tech Live. One
It's
question Daft Duck
really
asked:
big.
LXC, is this using LXC at all, or
It's not using LXC. We will get to that in a minute, but we'll get to LXC. Please, if we get towards the end, I want to talk about Lexi, LexD, Incus, all that stuff, because it's also important. Is it what is it? Tech Live and Sousa?
yeah?
It is.
One other question that showed up in chat.
Keep going. Yep.
Is just curious, is backing up a normal is backing up a immutable distro different from a normal distro?
Yes. So you could totally install, or you could totally back that up. I'm always of the firm opinion that I have limited disk space, like on my NAS and every stuff. I do not like backing up reproducible data. So what I do is I back up my home directories. In Etsy, I don't really have anything unique except the UUID to my drive. So I do put that in a little notebook in case I ever do need to do like or if I need to go in and like remount the disk. You ever mess something up? All right. However, how many times do you think I've had to do that in the past 3 years?
Well, you probably use Etsy Keeper.
0. It's so good. Yeah. All right. So what's happening here? George is installing containers. He's doing all this stuff. Let's get back here. I'm going to cheat here. This is my host container. Actually, what I like to do is I like to pin my host here. Because sometimes you do want to be on the host. But generally speaking, I'm doing my work in containers. Containers are awesome because I can throw them away. I can modify them. I can pull whatever I want. And crucially is I can break them. And it is now a clean separation from my base operating system. And that gives me a lot of flexibility. So let's see what's going on here. For, I'll even do one for you Arch kids. So the underlying technology that does this is called Podman, which is a container runtime. Docker also does this. That's a long story on why Podman exists, because Docker was free and like all that stuff. You can look that up on the internet. But Podman is what we're gonna use here. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cough here. And it's similar to a Docker syntax. A lot of people tell you can switch to Docker and just replace Docker with Podman and you'll be fine. Don't do that. They're totally different tools. Although generally speaking, you could do that, but there's also nuances there. So if someone ever tells you you can switch to Podman by just aliasing Podman to Docker, please do not do this. Okay. All right. So just like typing Docker images, we'll go with Podman images. What do we got? We got an Ubuntu toolbox. That's a term I want you to remember. Bluefin CLI, which is my own little custom one that I made. Here's a different Ubuntu toolbox. This was 2204. There's my OpenSUSE toolbox, which I made 2 days ago or whatever. And then we can do Podman PSA. And what do we see? The containers are running there up about an hour ago. That's when I started to prep for this thing, right? So what tools do we use for this? Red Hat gives you a tool called Toolbox. Sorry, Fedora gives you a tool called Toolbox. I don't like it. What I do like and how I use what I do to enable this trickery is a tool called Distrobox. Please, Craig, make sure this is in the links. Distrobox. And we'll just do a little help here. Oh, okay. That looks reasonable enough. So you're going to go read some documentation. It shouldn't take you that long. It's a convenience wrapper for Podman for you. Okay. So somebody name a distro. Let's go Distrobox create -i. Any Arch kids in the audience? Anybody?
I've used it somewhat.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's do Alma Linux.
There you go.
Will this bring me the right thing? Yeah. Oh, look, that's just like a Docker pull, right? Cool. Let's go into Alma Linux. Boom, boom.
Right. That's one way to find out.
Yeah, that one way to find
That's
out.
what we love about open source software, right? What is it? Let's go try it.
Let's go try it.
No barrier to entry, right?
I'm in a safety of a container. And let me tell you, compared to how we use, people would tell me in IRC, they're like, try this thing. And next thing I know, I'm like breaking my computer, right? So now if you're like, what is in Alma Linux, right? Let's find out. So I've learned.
I mean, how
Right.
much easier is that than teaching somebody either go burn the disk or
Yep.
find the right disk that it can actually burn on because it's a little over 700 or whatever. Like there's always some glitch or
Yep.
the wrong USB port or even getting it installed on the operating system in the first place. How do you get the BIOS to load the boot thing? You know, oh
Right.
man, it skips so much of that.
Yeah. And what's really nice is like, I guess this is what it is, which is probably bad, but luckily the settings here on the registry. If you're ever doing scripts and stuff like this, you always want to put the fully qualified name of the registry in case the evil George at work replaced the thing. However, on the desktop use case, distros come with like the short names already set to you by default. That's why I didn't have to type hub.docker.com/blah, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what's actually happening here is it pulled the Alma Linux container, and then it's installing these basic packages, which it kind of needs to do a bunch of the magic that we're about to do. So while that's going, let's go back to OpenSUSE is doing its OpenSUSE thing. Let's go back to Ubuntu. Now,
Can I ask a question?
go shoot. Is that Mark? Sounds like Mark.
No, it's Jim here.
Oh, hi, Jim.
Yeah. If you go back to that window you were in,
This one?
the original, no, the other one, the first one.
This one?
Yeah, the first one that was installing Alma.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, so are you installing Docker images? Because you're using Distrobox, and so it's another way to handle Docker images,
Yes.
which is peculiar to this immutable OS setup.
No.
No.
Actually,
Okay.
you can run Distrobox. Distrobox is just bash. You can run it on any Linux, including immutable ones. The reason they're so kind of necessary in immutable ones is we don't have a package manager on the host. We do, but I'll get to that in a little bit later. But as far as your day-to-day kind of I need stuff, right? We don't have like a day-to-day using package, right? Now, I am not expecting you all to sit there and say, now I'm going to have a SUSE thing and an Ubuntu thing. I'm in my Ubuntu container, like whatever thing you're using for. However, even if you don't use anything that you like, you don't have to reformat your computer, be like, George is right. This is the future. I'm going to go do it. If all you do is install Distrobox and learn how to use containers this way, instead of apt installing packages on your host, your upgrades will be way more reliable because you'll be doing the work in containers. Now, the reason I say this is, where are these files? Any guesses?
I'm going to say under var.
Where these files are. But I'm in a container. Anybody have any guesses?
So they're mounting that in all your containers in their shared home directory across the board.
Let's see. So that's Ubuntu. Let's actually look at that. That's going to take a while. All the enterprise Linux stuff, lots of packages. See, SUSE. Well, we did Tech Live here, so that will keep running for 3 days.
Oh,
yes. So by default, the reason we call Distrobox a convenience wrapper is it's designed to make this transparent to you, so that if you install Vim, why would you install Vim? To edit a text file, right?
Right.
So I want to do Vim. See, it even gives me the sweet. I do all the Vim stuff. Now, if I do Vim etc, say resolve.conf, what file do you think we're going to get?
Ubuntu's version of it.
Hey, yes, true. Except I'm doing some tailscale thing. Let's pick what's another file in there that's apt. There we go. Sources.list. There it is. Right. This file is not on my host. Right.
right.
So these Distrobox containers are kind of designed to just be a thing. Right. So what's really great is you can pass any container to Distrobox and it will figure out. That's why it's installing these Alma packages and stuff and taking a while. The first time really kind of takes a while. And what this does is it lets me, so I switched to Fedora. I want to learn RPM and it's all slow anyway. Right. And I was like, I've been around too long. I just need to apt-get. I just need to apt-get install Vim. 99% of the stuff is in my home directory that I'm acting with anyway. If I really needed to go to the console, like really actually edit my system host name or something like that, I always have a host console available to me. So now I have this concept of my host terminal, right? And then I have my Distrobox terminal. So what I do is through my day-to-day, when someone says, hey, what is the new version of Python coming up in the new version of Ubuntu, right? You can go look that up, right? But it's also really nice to just Distrobox create one on the spot, test your application, right? And see, oh, okay, cool. The next version of LTS is coming out. Hey, boss, I found 2 issues that we need to fix or whatever, right? And then when 2204 actually comes out on the bare metal, right, you've kind of given yourself a little thing, right? Or does my application run on different Linux distributions, right? Ideally, we're just giving everyone Docker containers, but we also live in the real world, right? Where like people are just copying stuff around and things like that. So this becomes a very powerful tool. However, we have a problem. Does anyone know what that problem is?
Well, I mean, they can interfere with each other.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the first thing is
yes.
Yeah.
I
expect them to stomp on each other at some point.
They can, depending on what you do, right? Like if you pip install on the OpenSUSE one, it's got an older version of Python, right? And it shoves pip stuff in your home directory, which it will. And then you move to a different version of Python and you do pip install in your home directory because it puts stuff in your path. Kablamo, right? That sucks. That's why Distrobox has a really neat tool called Ubuntu. Let's say it's an older version, 1804. Let's do that. Then we can do -h var home George temp. I don't think I've created temp, so it might give me an error. Make dir temp. Wait, where am I? I've gone too far. I'm on the host. Okay. So I do have a temp. Dumb things I do. Sorry, everything's a mess. Where is it? -H. We're going to put 1804. Notice how smaller the Ubuntu 1804 image is compared to the usual enterprise Linux things. But it still needs to install some packages, so that'll take a time. And but what usually happens is after you do the initial creation, from then on, it becomes instant. So, and there's a small startup the first time you boot into the computer, but it's generally instant there once it needs to go. Let's check on our host. Alma's going to take a while. Susan's still, Pearl is still going, right? Can you imagine having this on your host, right? And then you have to dist up the equivalent of a SUSE dist upgrade thing, right? You're just like, ugh. And each one of those packages is a vector to fail, especially as you add third-party packages that we always do, even though we're told not to. And even if you do, you try to remove them, but there's probably something because you didn't do a purge, all that goes away because I can just throw this container away. So that's going to go there for a minute. Oh man, it's not even close, Craig. Look,
I know
it's not even close. Yeah, that's not finishing tonight.
So there are several questions.
Yeah, let's go. What do you got for me?
Asking about graphical desktops.
Ooh,
in different VMs.
What do we think's going to happen? What's a graphical application? Try to think of a small one.
Audacity.
GVim.
Yeah, or GVim. Yep.
Vim GTK3, is that right?
Yep, that's
sound right?
Yep.
What's going on here? Boom. What do we think is going to happen here?
That it's not going to know where to display to.
I mean, Xorg is going to have some weirdness. Or what? Oh, no, this uses Wayland now?
I'm in X because I was in Zoom,
Yeah.
but normally I'm in Wayland.
Okay.
But I'm just going to tell you that doesn't matter right now.
Okay. Oh,
Don't you have to give the container permission to access the X server?
it just opens.
It does.
Distrobox, the convenience wrapper part, right?
Yeah.
Ah,
Right. So GVim, it even tells me on Ubuntu Hamilton. Look at this. Performance, same. You can run Steam in here, by the way, right? And it totally does that. Now, if you want to open files, where do we think we're going to be? Hey,
Yeah, in the temp directory.
No, and this one, no, this is the first
It
Ubuntu.
brought you to the first home. Yeah.
Right. So you're gonna be able to what did I use? There's that README file. Boom, there it is. And then I can save it. Right.
Does cut and paste work across Windows?
Yep. Now we're on the host. Now I'm on gedit, which is on my host. Boom. Now, one of the reasons I mentioned this is in systems like this, your graphical applications are flatpaks. So if you go to your software center, sorry, you're going to have to deal with this not awesome wallpaper or application. You go in here, you install it. This is installing things on your host, right? However, not everything is going to be in a flatpak, right? Like people are supposed to be translating, it's taking forever, all that stuff. So it's nice to have and be able, whether you use these kind of, this kind of system on your host, to have that as a backup, right? And I clearly messed this up because this was supposed to let me do a thing. Hold on. I swear to God, other people have this working. All right. So I clearly messed that up. So what will happen is when you use, let me actually just take you to the docs because that is easier. You could tell I don't use that feature often because what I do tend to do is I keep one distro box, which is my Ubuntu one, transparent to my home. And then that's all I really need. However, I do use temporary ones all the time. And usually it's like, what version of a thing is in here? So if we go to Distrobox, the website, since you can run any image, it's basically you have every OS at your fingertips. It's really nice while having to do the VM stuff. But the create here, this is what you want. It's called the -H. This feature makes it really nice because if you were doing all this stuff and you were polluting your home directory, you could potentially it depends on your use case. You can get in a lot of trouble. However, I do know people that in their home directory, they have a projects folder, right? And then they have a distro box assigned to each of those projects. So when they go in there, this project's going to be Ubuntu 18.04, and it always opens with the right OS that customer of theirs needs or that client or whatever, right? And it's associated with that data. You know what I mean? And then they close that and then they open a new terminal or shortcut or whatever they have. And it's a different customer with a different, I still got to support this thing on Ubuntu 14.04, right? And they keep that associated. So I wanted to point that out as a feature because it's pretty awesome. Oh man, look at it, actually got to the end, Craig.
I am impressed.
How big do we think that container is?
Since it was able to run X applications, couldn't you? What would happen if you installed Zoom in your container and then join the meeting?
I could totally do that. Yeah, I would just need to make sure that the executable I'm running is inside the distro box. But let's do this.
You are a very dangerous man roller.
I am, but let's do cat Etsy OS release. So we know Alma Linux is called, this is version 9.3, Shamrock Pampas Cat. That's a good question. Where do these names come from? Right? It's a Rel CentOS Fedora clone. It's got these versions and all these kind of cool stuff. There, homepage, the wiki. That's very handy. So it's DNF. Is it sudo DNF install? What do we say? GVim? I think they do call it GVim in here. Let's see what happens. We'll come back to this one. And text live should be here. Look, there it is. All right.
There you go. One question
back.
that showed up on
Keep going.
YouTube after Story asked, flatpak still layering on the base OS?
No, the flatpaks actually install on top. So they're a different layer. So that is a great question. Let's open up a new host. Do flatpak list. These are all the flatpaks. So my Firefox, a lot of my GNOME tools. Let's see what I have. A sync thing, Obsidian. Here's my Podman desktop. Is a cool tool called Headlamp. You should check out if you're into Kubernetes. Celluloid, my favorite video player. My Todoist app. An extension manager thing. They are all here. And they are all running on the host. And there's Zoom. That's what I'm on right now. We're not messing with that one because I'm paranoid. So.
And if you get a chance to, could you show DF and top results in each of these things? Because that'd be kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah. So let's do top in here. Oh, that's weird. What container am I in? OpenSUSE, but I wrote top. Huh. Well, definitely running a Kubernetes cluster on this machine. That might explain some things. Let's see. Let's do top on here. Zoom again. And then here. So I'm glad you asked this question because normally when people say containers and stuff, they're like, you want to do process isolation and da-da-da-da-da. Remember, this is a convenience wrapper for you in order to be able to use this kind of stuff. But it's still all owned by you. So even though I'm in this Distrobox, I can see the processes that are on the host, right? You'll have to mess around to see what you can touch or what you can't. But like Tailscale's definitely running on my host, not in here. Like you didn't see me install Kubernetes in here, right? And that's running. However, if you were to not use Distrobox, actually, let me just show you what Distrobox is doing. I just killed a bunch of stuff. Who knows what's going to happen? Let's just go to the docs real quick. And one of the reasons I love Distrobox is actually GitHub. One of the reasons I love Distrobox is it's bash. So I can look at Distrobox create. Because you can actually just do podman. You've done this before, probably. Docker run-it, right? And then a container name, and then it takes you into the thing, right? So this is all the stuff that it is creating. And here's some examples, right? Latest, you can have it run init hooks first if you want to do some kind of setup. You can do post. You can set environment variables. You can mount different volumes. Remember, by default, we're just doing the home. So if you wanted to actually do like a setup where everything is just declared, you know what you want to do. Real handy one, -- additional packages. So if you want the thing to come up a certain way every single time, you don't want to if you're like, oh no, I broke that box, and you throw it away and you want to create it and not have to reinstall that stuff. You know, what I would do is actually take your setup script that you have, maybe toss it into an init hook or something. So that's really handy, but let's look at the create command. When you look at it, once we get to it. No, is this it? No, we're looking for the podman command. It might be easier if I just type podman. Or maybe create. Podman create. No. Is it just create? These are the examples. Generate the create command and run it. We're close in here. Anyway, man, this has really changed a lot. But if you look at the flags on what they're doing, this is what I was looking for, right? So this will run on machines that also run Docker. So like if you have a machine that has Docker already installed, you can also install Distrobox, and then it will run the same way as Podman. That's why, they have to generate commands and stuff. Base, the name of the container, the user ID, all that stuff. And also like -- NVIDIA. So if you have NVIDIA drivers on the host, you can pass that to the container. So if you download NVIDIA's machine learning image or whatever, and then try to do that thing, it'll pass the right things. And then look, here's the additional packages and things like that. So that is also where they're setting, it's in there somewhere, the ability for the export. You notice how the exporting just like worked without typing. What do we used to have to type, Jim?
Xhost
plus.
Yeah.
It's been too long.
Yeah. And that also works with Wayland as well. So that's pretty handy. So let's go back to our SUSE one though. So which one did we install? Was it Alma we installed GVim in? Oh, sure. I think I closed it while I was running. And now I got package manager jank. But I don't want to take up too much time with Distrobox because first of all, this is really neat. You could do an entire talk on just Distrobox tips, and you could use it on any Linux as well. So I find that very handy. So if someone's ever like, hey, do you have any experience running these kinds of stuff? You could just fire them up. And then I like to have them here. This isn't my everyday work machine, but in my work machine, I have like I have my everyday Distrobox and stuff like that. But, I always keep a version of the next LTS one, to have. And every once in a while, because I do work on Fedora stuff now, I need to look up Fedora stuff. So on my Upser machines, I just have it where I hit Control-F and my Fedora box comes up. If I hit Control-Alt-U, my Ubuntu box comes up, and I just close them, and they just act like independent little Linux distros there. So that is a great thing for you to look. But I've now show you the last cool thing that I'm going to do here is talk a little bit about OSTree native containers. So someone sent me this spec, the author did. I read it and I was like, look at this. I have no idea what this is. Right? Like, okay, that kind of makes sense to me. The OCI thing makes sense to me. Because Fedora is actually in the middle of a transition from raw OSTree, which is served over like a traditional endpoint. There was like a service that ran to this OSTree native model, which is not live in Fedora yet, and it's coming out this spring. I'm showing a lot of stuff that's like not a lot of people really are using or understand. There are even Red Hatters are like, we're making this, so that's like really, really cool stuff in here. But what's important about this is that if you go to Docker Hub, right? What's the favorite database y'all are using these days? Is it still Postgres?
Just do Postgres, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Definitely Postgres.
Yeah. Something's never changed, right? So you come in here, right, and you see this. Any of you using Postgres, the image at all, like at work or anything like that? Like, do these tags make sense to you at all? All right, well, let's see what happens. So I'm not going to go really knee deep on how you make a Postgres container, but here's the pattern, right? This is a Docker file. We're going to build from Debian, Bookworm, which is the version of Debian, Slim, which is like a slimmer one, right? You're going to run all these stuffs, add the group for Postgres, add the user for Postgres. You're going to apt-get update. You're going to install this stuff. You're going to do this. This is the kind of stuff that we used to have to do by hand, but now we stick in a Docker container, right? Because it works on my computer. Fine, we'll just ship your computer to everybody. It's kind of the Docker thing, right? And you're doing all of these kinds of stuff. And what does that get me? That gets me Postgres 16. Let's just go with latest, right? So when I say Postgres, well, that's going to give me the it's going to give me the one from Red Hat, and I don't want that one. Sorry, I'm just looking for an example here. Oh, it might just be that. Okay. And I'm in my Ubuntu container. See what I did there? See how easy it is to confuse yourself? Pop and run Postgres. That's why I like, oh, nice. I love this. Let's grab it from Docker. Each one of those commands was a layer, right? And now I have Postgres running on this machine. And then if I actually remembered how to use Postgres, I would connect to the thing and do the thing. So this is a common pattern for developers. And remember how I said it's really, really annoying that how slow that RPM. Oh, remember how slow that was? So I said, I've had enough of this. So what me and some friends did is we grabbed Fedora, and it doesn't come with codecs, it doesn't come with anything useful. And they decided to modify it for our own nefarious purposes. So what you can do here now is the pattern that they enabled. This is why I picked Fedora for this. Is Fedora, no, I want to look at container file. Fedora made it so that we can now take that Docker file pattern and generate custom images of our operating system. So this started off a very long time ago. It would just say from Fedora, and then we would do this. But then it got complicated, and we started to template out stuff. So what we're able to do is generate a bunch of custom images using container files. So let me, sorry, I know I'm confusing a lot of people right now. But if you look at here, these are all operating system images. So we made a GNOME one, a KDE one. We made an empty one with NVIDIA drivers. This is XFCE. There's a thing called LXQt I'd never heard of. There's like an AK mods thing. We started to do all this kind of stuff. And that's actually when I did an RPM-OSTree update. You can alias some commands too to run on the host, but when I did a status, that's what this is these Docker files that we're making on GitHub using actions pushed into a registry. So what that means is I've made my own version of Ubuntu because Mark wouldn't make it for me.
Damn, Mark.
You know? And in here, I said, you know what? I want to install this stuff, and I want to install this prompt terminal, right? And I want to install this tool called Just, which is like a shortcut thing. And then I hate that Fedora doesn't include Xbox drivers in the kernel because it's non-free or whatever. So I just had a buddy figure this out for me, right? And then we did all this. This is kind of 2 years worth of effort. Sorry. But as you get here, it's like, you know what? You know what I want? I want this to come with Flux and Helm and kubectl, and I want Docker Compose to just be here, right? So I copy stuff. I'm doing things that most of you probably think are unholy. You know what? I want these services to be turned on and then clean it all up in the end because I don't want those extra repositories around. And then we templated it out to say, you know what? I want all of these things to just come on my computer from now on, right? Now, typically in the past, I would have made a Ansible or like a Puppet thing. Some of you do Ansible, or you just like write a script in Bash. What's really powerful about this is a lot of people really know how to make container files, and they kind of wrote this for me so that anyone can just come here, fork it, and create your own like workstation thing, right? So I said, you know what? I want my desktop to always come with the blur, the dash to dock, the logo menu's cool. I have an HP print. Everyone has HP printers, so let's just put that in there. but I want a developer experience to be a separate image. I want to install all of my favorite nerd fonts. So when you read about a cool font, one of us goes in here, PRs this in, right? And then GitHub builds the image. And then that night, when it updates, the next time I reboot the machine, I had the Adobe source code pro fonts. So what we did was kind of organize ourselves and says, all right, what are we going to do here? Let's have some rules. We want these things and not these things. And then we started to add stuff. So I love all these fonts. Plex Mono is one of my favorite fonts, right? So now that I have that in there, like I will always just have that font on all of my machines. And what's really great is because this is just a cloud pattern. If you go into hub.docker.com and type Postgres again, right? It took me right to where's like the search results that I missed. But when you search for Postgres, let's try another one. Right? There's all sorts of different images, right? Like there's probably thousands of Postgres images. Let's see if we can do it here. Just do MySQL. Look, there's one for MySQL. There's MariaDB. There's Percona. Here's the web admin thing. Bitnami has a MySQL one. Circle CI has a MySQL one. Look how many pulls these have. Millions and millions, right? Ubuntu will be more than happy to sell you a MySQL container with support. Same with these people, I'm sure. This is the one Google prefers for you to use. You know what I mean? Like you could just scroll all day with this. So what I like about this is if you were to git clone this repository and change all this stuff, you would just have my workstation, right? So a bunch of us have been getting together and saying, hey, Fedora, this is really, really neat. You should explore this pattern more, right? Like I don't want to install this stuff. And I want to remove their Firefox and install mine. And, I want this extension depending on this version. So this was a bunch of scaffolding that people wrote for me that basically generates a config file. Then when I go to my GitHub actions, we have an action called build and push image. Oh no, my build is red. What happened? And my Asus NVIDIA image is broke. So if you look at the build script itself, right? We templated out different versions of Fedora here, did a whole bunch of actions, and then basically do a podman build. We added metadata. That's always nice to have. And then we basically stick podman in a for loop. So every day, my workstation image, which is a Docker image, is built on GitHub, and then a whole bunch of people use it. And then we just share the maintenance together, and we've decided this is just going to be how our desktop is, right? And then I have a friend who says, well, you know what? I'm really into gaming, right? So I want to make a gaming one. So he did just that, and it's called basite.gg, but he prefers KDE. So that's what he put on there, right? And then what he did, he started taking all of the patches of all the stuff that he wanted to make the world's greatest gaming system, and he started to put it in there because it's a container file. If there's an error, it fails at build time and not on the person's computer, right? So if you wanted to set up your own perfect thing, you can add all of these third-party repos, PPAs, all this kind of stuff, and then you end up with a fragile mess, right? So what we do now is we take that fragile mess, we stick it into GitHub, get it to build, add tests, checks, and things like that, and then it builds regularly for us. Usually I'm asleep when my operating system is being built, right? That is pretty cool. We've turned the desktop into GitOps, and that's very exciting to me because when I'm getting the upgrade, I know that if something failed, I wake up to an email that says your GitHub build failed because the Lexi third-party repository bumped a version. You know what I mean? And then the broken image, the broken thing never gets to my computer because the image never built. So according to RPM-OSTree, I am on the latest image because there is no latest image on the registry until it builds, right? And what this lets us do is not only take advantage of the reliability locally, but it also lets us share the load of maintaining something with everybody. I mean, they got this thing running on the Steam Deck. It's pretty cool. It's called Basite. If you're a gamer, you should check it out. So that's kind of like what I've been doing, making this project. to kind of prove the model. And I really want to see people do the same thing, but with like systemd system extensions. And Nix is a whole totally different topic that kind of looks like this, but it also is a totally different language. The file system layout is totally different.
Yeah,
but
I was
the idea,
say, the Nix thing was what first came to mind when you were showing me this, because someone stopped me at a conference and just blew my mind.
Yeah.
check this out. And it was just compiling and doing all this stuff.
Yeah. And I tell people, it's like, Nix is really great, right? I'm not going to learn an entirely new, like Turing complete language to learn how to install Vim, right? I need a base operating system and a package. You saw that package list? I could totally do that. Nix was just like a bridge too far for me. Although some people dig it, that's totally fine. And we do have people that run Nix in a container so that they can like learn how to do it. Because once you go Nix OS, like you're deep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Those
One
guys
of the
are
other
talking about
questions
the
that showed up.
firewalls and stuff.
Oh yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
So we got one question that says, what does it mean to have an NVIDIA running in a Docker image? Doesn't it need to be running in the host to offer the advantage of managing NVIDIA card / chip?
Yeah. So one of the things we like about our images is we offer NVIDIA versions. So when you install NVIDIA drivers on your machine, right, it uses a thing called on Ubuntu, this thing called DKMS, right, which compiles the driver on your computer and all that stuff. And every time you get a new kernel, it has to do all that stuff, right? And if you have an NVIDIA machine, sometimes that just doesn't work. And you get an upgrade for your kernel, you turn on your computer, and the screen is black, right? One of the nice things about this method is we do build NVIDIA drivers in GitHub and CI. So when you boot into the image, the driver's already there. So there's no compilation step. We do have to do kargs, which is like setting the boot parameters to blacklist nouveau and all this kind of stuff. So there's still a little bit of jank there. What we're hoping for, what the OSTree folks want to do is be able to set boot arguments in the actual container file, right? So that like that perfect, sometimes people tell you I have this framework laptop and it works perfectly unless you don't pass it this boot argument, and then the keyboard lights don't work. And you're like, what? I don't, and then you run it once, right? And then it's good to go.
Or the CPU just burns until the battery dies in a few minutes.
Yeah. And then 2 years later, it's like time for a reinstall. You reinstall. And I was like, oh man, I forgot. My keyboard lights don't work unless I pass this argument. And then you got to remember, and then you're Googling again. And you're like, man, I should have written it down and right? So what if OEMs just had the image there and it was just kablamo, right? Like your Dell XPS, the first one shipped with a PPA. I think about that now. That's like a nightmare, right? But back then, that was like the best thing we had, and then eventually you would upgrade, and that will all work, except it didn't sometimes, right? That's the thing. You never know. You always have. It feels sometimes when you're doing Linux, right? Those of you play Dungeons and Dragons, you have to do a saving throw where you roll the dice, right? And if you roll it too low, like the monster hits you, but if you roll a 20, you're good to go, right? And the systems like this kind of help you buff up that saving throw. So it's like, look, your computer's going to break sometimes, but I really, apt upgrades breaking has been around since 2004, 2003. I'm ready to move on from that. So that's like where the model is, where people are slipping on this. And part of the reason I spent time showing Distrobox to you is to learn how to keep your work stuff in containers. Like, for example, when I do Visual Studio Code, a lot of people still, they're kind of doing it in a way that's, what do? I apt-get install. Oh, nice. I apt-get install PHP or whatever on my, I apt-get install PHP and then I connect my IDE, right? Whereas in later, and I'm really failing at some of these live demos today. Hold up. You want to close, right? Whereas usually developers do something like do a new dev container, right? And then you just hit enter, and then it goes and gives you the graphical thing, right? And then this is grabbing the Anaconda container, which is sitting in a registry somewhere. And if you do the log, this is the kind of stuff that typically, you see this Docker pulling stuff, that's typically the kind of things that you will be doing on your host to install the thing that you need. Whereas these days, a lot of developers are moving to that container flow, and Visual Studio Code is just like the example, right? Where you could just kind of work with Docker files directly and not doing that stuff on your host. And this could be a problem for people if they're kind of used to apt-get install lamp stack, right? And you hit enter and it gives you Apache and everything is on the host. Whereas now these days, modern tools, you can just go in there and say, give me a lamp stack. It'll pull that Postgres container. It'll do all that stuff for you. And then your IDE is running and you could just start writing Python, right? So that's kind of the more modern approach. The issue that people have with these quote unquote immutable operating systems is they're not used to working that way. And the reason containers force you to do this is if you do it this way, the end result that you produce as a developer is a container. And then you hand that off to an ops person like me, and then we throw it on the cluster, right? And that is a lot easier than it used to be, where it was like, Jim, you gave me your app and it doesn't work in production. And you're like, well, I'm on Ubuntu 18.04. Oh no, the web server is on 22.04, right? Or whatever. Now imagine three people, right? So what did companies start to do? Everyone on the same thing, right? And then next thing you know, that's why you show up to work and you're like, why are we still on version? Why is this Java from like 2006? That's why, you know? So this container stuff lets people like accelerate and things like that. And it's just nicer for you to be able to say, everyone's going to use this Python container. We're going to lock it to that version. So every time you open up VS Code, you're always going to get the right version, right? And then in each of the projects that you have at work or personal or whatever, and there's that Docker file where you have all those versions explicitly set for you. And there's lots of toolings that do this, right? With like Poetry with Python or whatever, that lets you lock in those versions, right? So that when you do a build, it's the exact same way every time, right? And that's what we want, because when we do that, you get the nice clean container at the end, and then I'm oversimplifying here, it just gets handed off to ops and it magically shows up in your cluster, right? But the simplistic version of that is, I want to code here and not care about the operating system when I'm actually going to serve it. So these systems force you to work that way, right? And a lot of people, if they don't have that workflow, that could be very foreign to them, right? Whereas me, this is just every day. So a lot of people, like if you're a developer and you're not familiar with container workflows, this might all be like a little much, right? You're like, look, man, I just want to open Vim, you know, and like do my business.
George, since there could be hundreds of Docker containers for any one purpose, how do you know how to pick which ones are the ones that you want and aren't malicious? Maybe somebody's a bad actor or something.
That is a great question. Is all the major registries have this? It's the official image that gives you the thing. Some projects publish official images. Some projects have like deals with Docker where it's like, you know, we don't make it, but like we prove it or whatever. A lot of companies, the Docker container is just an artifact that you purchase, right? So it's like, if I were to buy a support contract for MySQL from Percona, right, they would support their official Docker container, right? And they would have that, right? Or if I buy it, if I'm like, you're too expensive, I'll just buy it from Ubuntu, right? Ubuntu/MySQL is the thing that you do. There's a bunch of tools out there that let you check that stuff. However, this area of computing is really, really busy right now, because supply chain security, being able to confirm that binary is exactly what it says to do, is one of the things that people have been talking about since 2023, 2024. The past year or so has been how do we lock down the supply chain on software, right? Because SolarWinds happened, right? And it's like, what's to stop someone from maliciously, this has happened, pull a binary from npm, right? And then like half the internet breaks, you know? That's called supply chain security, and it is actually it's a different foundation. And this is like a industry, sorry, your Linux Foundation commercial for the day. There are people actively working on these in order for you to be able to confirm down to like the things. So there's another project that I do want to put on your radar is SigStore, which is a method that is used to sign all of these artifacts. And this is, over the past few years, this has kind of been the industry standard on signing containers at creation time, right? And then the end user being able to verify. So that container that I made that I showed you on GitHub, I have a SigStore key that I store as a secret in my GitHub organization, right? And the way SigStore is designed is those actions that I showed you sign the container at the very end. And then I can there's a tool called cosign that I can sign, and it will verify the key. And then in our GitHub repo, there's a public key, and those match. And the way SigStore is designed is if that is ever not matching, like the tools will fail, the build will fail, right? So I can't actually build that container locally and push it to that registry manually. Like that, that would result in an error. However, what I do like to tell people is if you're using containers at work, you should be signing them with SigStore at some point, and whatever tooling you're using at the other end should be verifying and checking that signature is valid. So when I from something, we actually put this in our tooling, it verifies the signature. And if the signature does not pass, we don't do a build. You just get an email that the image has failed. And then all of us will be like, huh, that's weird. The key changed. And then we know what happens, right?
Okay.
However, this is a very, very active part in the industry right now. Like if you know this stuff, you are in high demand for all of this stuff, because it's the nightmare, right? Somebody in open source somewhere, right, did a commit somewhere to a thing, right? And they're like, there are governments involved. How many wars are happening right now, like in the world? Like there are attacks everywhere, right? So being able to sign all the way down is a very important thing. This is one of my favorite, coolest projects because I don't have to use GPG anymore.
Well, even pip install, you never know what you're actually installing. I don't know if that has similar checks or not.
Yeah, so part of that is an industry-wide effort, right? NPM, the Python Foundation, Homebrew just got, for those of you that are Macs, there's a project from the OpenSSF that's sponsoring getting SigStore signing into Homebrew. So when you type brew install Python or whatever on your Mac, it does the thing. So that's in progress. And you're right, like NPM's the one that keeps these people up at night. Like those of you that have seen all of the wonderful things that are happening in there.
Oh yeah, what a mess that is.
Yeah. But if you get a chance, this is called supply chain security, is what you want to Google for.
Yeah.
And
okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question, because like you're like, am I just Docker pulling rain? Because this did happen. Like when Docker came out, people would just Docker pull from anybody, right? And
right, and in your use case, you're using this for all your machines. What's the network setup? Is there a way you can isolate the machines, stuff like that? Because sure, it's cool. Like you're just testing stuff. Maybe I want to throw it into a testing bubble. DMZ or something, so that it's not sharing my host files and it's not doing all the stuff until I can trust this thing, and then I put it in.
So one of the reasons I love that they pick OCI tech and all this container stuff is all of everything that I showed you there, you could run on your home NAN. Like it doesn't even need to leave your network. Like I'm actually working on like a set of scripts where it's like run this, and then you could push local you could be able to do all of that stuff. Anything that you could do to your operating system, you can generally do to that image, right? So if you want a certain network configuration, right? So I use Tailscale, but a friend of mine uses WireGuard, right? And he has his WireGuard stuff set out at home. His image, he keeps his WireGuard config on the image. So when he gets a new machine, then he goes to the coffee shop. He's on his VPN at all times because he just includes it. He just includes it in there. And I thought that was That's really cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I put Tailscale all on mine. That's what I use as like my VPN. And like all my machines just have it one day. And then when they come out with a new version at GitHub that night, it notices there's a new RPM, it builds it, and then all my machines get it. I've ran Linux labs at Oakland University, where we had hundreds and hundreds of lab machines, and we were using golden images and ghosting and all this stuff. I wish I could make a time machine, because
Right.
from a lab perspective, can you imagine? You could just shove everything you want. I'd just put an entire copy of Katia in there, and nobody's care, right? Because they could be as big as you want. That's the thing. We're pulling from GitHub, and you saw I put a lot of stuff in there, and there's big downloads.
That's the other feature, right? The big differentiator there is a VM. You got 32 gigs, but now how many machines are you going to run on that? If you're providing at the beginning, how much you're going to take away from the host, and you're chopping away from the host. And in this case, you're all sharing the host resources, so you don't have to even you have to take that into as much of a consideration.
Yeah, because you could just run.
Is there a resource control that you can put on the host, so that you can say like always reserve one CPU for the host in case I do some poll that goes nuts, uses up all my resources, and I want to go and kill it?
A lot of stuff is kind of designed like Podman and all that stuff. Like somebody already figured that out. There is a tool. There is a tool that I use called Pods, Pods. It's in FlatHub, that will show you a little graphical of all the. Actually, I should have led with that. It shows you all the containers and stuff and the amount of CPUs and things you can do like that. There is resource sharing and isolation that you could do. Like you could say, I want this Ubuntu one to only have this amount of resources, but that gets pretty hairy for me. I usually don't end up in that situation, but the server nerds have that all figured out, right? Where it's like, hey, the control pane is supposed to have this amount of resources and percentages, and they're always trying to play that Tetris game. How many containers can we get on every host, right? To get that density. On a workstation on my PC, I've never had to really worry about that. Actually, I've done entire gaming sessions where I left a Kubernetes cluster running and didn't really notice. You'll notice when it's busy, but when it's sitting there idle, on modern hardware, it's pretty good, I would say.
We got one final question before we wrap everything up. How tied is this all to a fast network connection? Michael Clay asks. For example, I'm at an airport and I need to do an install of Vim. How is that doable in a half-ass connection?
Yeah. So doing the container thing, apt-get install Vim, no change, right? Doing a 1.6 gigabyte update on a plane, not gonna work. One of the drawbacks of this method is all of those optimizations become a Docker layer at the bottom, and there are no diffs between Docker layers. You have to download the whole last layer. And the way it builds right now is all of our modifications are one big layer. However, that is on the radar of the right people and right committees, SIGs, and all that stuff. I'm hoping we get that this year. What I do usually is, because I am on a trip, is I will rebase to that Friday's image, and I won't. I'll just turn off updates until I get back from my trip. For few reasons: A, hotel internet is just awful anyway, and even normal apt-get is like annoying. And B, if I'm going on a road trip, I need a working computer, and as wonderful as Fedora is, I don't want to take any risks, so I lock it to a version, right? But if I'm on an extended trip and I'm at a cafe or whatever, and I see a good internet connection, sure. But mostly for both safety and networking reasons, you could do that. And also, I think GNOME Manager's smart enough, right? If it like notices you're on a VPN or something like that, or if you're on a metered connection, it's smart enough not to do an update. But you do end up with this problem where it's like, I have to update all my computers now, right? So you got your host, you've made 6 distro boxes, right? So Distrobox has a command called Distrobox-A, which is very rewarding to watch. It will go into all the containers and run whatever the update command is for that distro and tail them all to you. So it's like, upgrade the world. And it's just kind of very satisfying to do that. But yes, containers in general consume a lot of bandwidth if you're working with them regularly. However, for example, if you do have the one Ubuntu container and you wanted to create a new one and you name it Ubuntu 2, right? You would have those layers already on your system and it would just create a new container based on that image. I hope that makes sense. Does that answer the question?
I think that does. And we're going to have to wrap it up anyway.
Oh my God, it's 9 o'clock.